So what is it like to be Frank?
Looks like I have to leave first thing in the morning for Japan.
Feeling that itch, huh?
You think I enjoy being out of town for weeks on end?
So this is another one of those movies that I didn't have high expectations for. Surprise, surprise. I thought it was gonna be just another one of those dramedy kind of movies that have quirky little outcomes and quirky little characters and forced conflict and a bunch of little like lame things and a cookie cutter storyline, and it just ends and you're really left with meh, that was okay. A lot of these types of movies just don't seem to have much to offer. They don't really leave you with anything to chew on, at least in my opinion. Maybe if you're into these movies, like really, oh, this is my thing, then you get more out of it. But just as a typical movie goer, movie viewer, whatever, I find them to typically be trite. And to make matters worse, the trailers that I saw for it didn't really seem to sell the movie for what it was. Obviously, I think sometimes that's intentional, but I really think if they could have conveyed what the movie had to offer better in the trailers, then it would have done a better job, I think, of piquing the viewer's interest and actually encouraging them to see the actual movie. So the first thing I'll say about the movie is that, in my opinion, the story was interesting and well executed. So essentially what the movie's about is a dad who has two families, and his son figures out that he has another family and sort of tries to use that to his advantage, and then it kind of goes from there into family dynamics and all kinds of things that provide some drama and some comedy. And one thing you would expect from a story like that is a guy who has two families and he's hiding them from each other is to demonize that character, and that's thoroughly what I expected. It was like, okay, this guy's obviously going to be painted as a bad guy. Everything is going to be shown from the perspective of the people that he's victimizing, and that's pretty much what all the story and the plot and everything will be predicated on. Surprisingly though, it actually does kind of give his side of the story. It even goes so far as to kind of give him more focus than I ever would have expected, and have him actually sort of explain the backstory and how the situation came to be. And it actually does it in a way that, to me, sympathizes with him effectively. Like, you don't condone what he's done or what he's doing, obviously, but it gives a lot more of a moral gray area to a story like this, and especially from a movie like this. You know, usually, like I said, you know, it's kind of two-dimensional. It's just like, this is bad, this is good, here's some quirky, funny stuff as a result of it. But instead, it kind of handles it with some thoughtfulness, and that was very surprising to me, and one of the main reasons I enjoyed the movie. So another interesting thing about the movie is that it's actually based in the 90s instead of present day, and I don't know if that's because it was based on something. I haven't looked into it, I'm not that familiar with the story, but that was interesting, and it's something I actually kept forgetting throughout the movie, and I kept wanting the main character, the son, to cut his hair.
Is your father home?
You've met my dad.
We go way back.
Your mom is a really good cook, isn't she?
She is.
Hard to believe that we keep missing each other after all these years.
Souvenir?
My dad got that in Japan.
Funny, I have the exact same one.
No way.
Way.
The cinematography, in my opinion, is pretty run-of-the-mill for this type of movie. It's nothing to write home about, but it's adequate for the movie. What really shined, in my opinion, was the directing and the writing. The dialogue for the characters doesn't really seem to come off as forced as a lot of movies like this do. They tend to come off more natural and kind of have a little bit more back and forth that's kind of just not perfect. A lot of movies like this, you know, like they kind of just have this very scripted, very kind of contrived dialogue to them, the way the conversations play out. And in this movie, to me, it felt a little bit more natural and a bit more, like, again, thoughtfulness was put into how the characters interact and how they communicate to each other and the emotions that they feel and things like that. It's all a bit more nuanced and less cookie cutter. For instance, there's a scene where the son and his best friend have a reason for conflict. Like, there's some things that have happened in the movie, and most movies at that point, they would have the, you did this, I can't believe you did that. And then the other one would be like, well, you did this, I can't believe you did that. And then now we're not talking anymore. This is an unresolvable conflict. But instead, in this movie, they kind of just have a little bit of a moment, like, how could you do this? Why didn't you tell me? We're best friends. I care about you. It's more like a real conversation where, like, I care about you. Why wouldn't you just tell me this thing? And then they actually kind of concede and be like, yeah, you know, blah, blah, blah. This is how this should have been done. I'm sorry, I didn't think you'd understand, or whatever. And the conflict is resolved and they're still friends, and then, like, life goes on. Like, a lot of movies like this, I feel like they take these little moments. It would just be a little bump in the road, a little spat between friends or family members, and suddenly they're not talking anymore over it or whatever. And it's like, that can happen. But there's usually more of a build-up. There's a nuance to why a small problem would escalate to that size and to be that divisive in a relationship. And the movies typically don't establish that. They just have this little convenient conflict to have the more drama that they want towards the end of the plot, towards the third act, the climax of the story, or whatever, second act. And they just use it to get there. And it's not realistic. It doesn't come off believable. And the characters come off as very shallow as a result. But fortunately, in this movie, they come off as relatively intelligent humans that know how to communicate with each other and try to resolve conflict. And there's not a lot of unnecessary conflict. The movie knows how to stay in its lane. And it's like, this dude has 2 families. We don't need a whole bunch of other external conflicts coming into it and muddying up the plot. So in that regard, I would say the directing and the writing of this movie is like pretty much spot on, at least in terms of avoiding some of those gaping pitfalls that a lot of movies like this always tend to fall into.
It's Bush League, man.
I'm sorry I don't know all your covert rules.
Rule number 1, only offer information when asked.
What's the holdup?
Having a little man talk. Sports, drinking, strippers.
The main focus of the movie to me, though, was the dad's character, played by Jim Gaffigan, which was kind of surprising, but he's also surprisingly effective and surprisingly dark. And like I said earlier, giving him a backstory that he reveals to his son, giving him an explanation, more screen time, just kind of letting the dad be a character in the movie and not some silhouette of the boogeyman that's driving everyone insane or apart or whatever, like a lot of these movies tend to do, was really unique and welcomed in my opinion. I really thought it was just going to be like, here's the dad, he's got 2 different families, and he's the bad guy, so how's the rest of the family going to react to that? Instead, it really showed his kind of, I don't know, it doesn't seem like he struggles with it as much, but it's been like 20 years, so it seems like realistically he's already probably dealt with the grief and the conflict and the emotional turmoil of his decisions and what's become of them and everything. So it kind of portrays him as a bit more of like, this is what I've got myself into, this is the situation, here are my reasons, I love my kids and I don't want anything to take them from me, stuff like that. And it really just paints a somewhat accurate picture of how a person might get into a situation like that. Again, there's some liberties, it's a movie. But if you accept the premise, then it really paints a good picture of someone who's trying to take very unfortunate circumstances and hold things together long enough for the people that he loves. And I just really think that that was a powerful way to approach this story, and it completely caught me by surprise because I didn't expect it to go that way, and I didn't expect Jim Gaffigan to play a role like this, and especially as well as he did. One last interesting note though is there's a character in the movie, the pothead uncle, and the way he's portrayed throughout the movie is humorous. It's kind of like, you know, oh, he's just 2-dimensional pothead uncle or whatever. But there's a little twist that they do with his character towards the end when they need him to help them in their little schemes or whatever, and it completely changes up his character and like what he represents and how he interacts in the movie. And he became like my favorite character as a result. It was really surprising and unexpected to me that they would do that with this character. So it was really cool to see kind of that progression and basically the difference between him on drugs and not on drugs. So it's just little things like that. The movie has a lot of that, like little detail and little character nuances that again, that's just above par. It's a little bit above average of what you typically see with these movies. And so, you know, anyone, if they've somehow stumbled upon this video and haven't seen it, if you like dramedies, if you like comedies, if you like dramas, and if you like quirky little family conflict and stuff like that, this is a movie that I think it's not going to give you quite the quirk that some of the more contrived stories do. But if you like something a little bit more grounded, a little bit more nuanced, then I think this movie has a lot to offer, and I enjoyed it far more than I expected. And I only saw it because my wife wanted to see it. So, but there you have it. That is my 100% authentic movie review rant of Check's Note, Being Frank. It's a very uncommon, unmemorable title. I had to keep looking it up.
Real fun time.
Me too.
It's like kind of like I'm your accomplice.
Better than my extortionist.
So yeah, Thanks for watching. Bye.